This is another episode or session, if you will, of our GP to BC webinar series. And this one is specifically addressing the data imports that we have. And because there will be some changes when you go from GP to BC, even if you're using SmartConnect. Dynamics GP data imports, we're typically using Integration Manager, or some folks are using Microsoft eConnect Web Services, and some may be using eOne's SmartConnect. They're all ways to get data in. Integration Manager's the one that's been out there the longest, and we still have GP folks using it. However, Integration Manager is not available to use with Dynamics BC. They've got just different tools that are available to do that. And that's fine because Integration Manager is limited. In some cases, we have to use VBA code to create batch totals for things, or a second side of an entry. We may have had to do some VBA code programming. Integration Manager uses VBA anyway, and that limits how it utilizes system memory. And it also causes some problems with security settings as Microsoft has advanced and rolled out additional security updates over the years. Sometimes it'll break Integration Manager outright. Other times it'll just break the VBA code that's used with it. It also has a speed issue. Microsoft's eConnect Web Services, they're actually used by Integration Manager, and they're used by eOne's solutions, SmartConnect, that we'll talk about. But if you're just using it without anything else, it can be very difficult to program or modify. It's not user-friendly. I'm a fairly techie person, and I don't even deal with eConnect stuff. I just deal with Integration Manager or SmartConnect. The eConnect web service is not available for all forms of data input, and it cannot perform data translations the way that a lot of clients need to have data transformed. And when I say it's not available for all forms of data input, for some third-party applications to get things to work, we've had to write some application code in order to make up for the gap in the eConnect web services. And that information, that the coding that we've done, can typically be used with SmartConnect, but it does not operate in a vacuum. It will not operate just by Microsoft's eConnect web service. The preferred tool that we're going to explore a bit of today is from a third party, eOne Solutions, and it's their SmartConnect product. You might be familiar with eOne Solutions because they're the ones that provide Smart List Builder and Smart View and some other tools. They've got Node Builder and such. And SmartConnect was the real gem they came out with that made a huge difference with doing stuff in Dynamics GP. And they've improved the product over the years as they've gone, and in order to keep it still to be fairly cutting edge, state of the art. And it is used and recommended by the TM group for use with Dynamics BC, and it's licensed as a subscription. It easily interfaces with the Office 365 products that you're going to be using with Dynamics BC. You have to have your Office 365 licenses, so it's pretty seamless integration with that. SmartConnect can transform data coming from other sources. You can do validations and things, and Bill can talk about that kind of thing. It can be set up to run on a time schedule, which actually is extremely difficult to make Integration Manager do. It's doable, but extremely difficult. SmartConnect is much easier. There's no VBA used in it, so therefore there's no VBA-related security issues that'll crop up. The long and the short of it is, if you're changing from GP to BC, Integration Manager goes away, and it is best, we recommend using SmartConnect. So that being the case, Bill Vassis is going to talk and do a little show and tell about SmartConnect. So I will stop sharing my screen. Bill can take over, okay?
So for this, I've actually got a demonstration. I've put together a set of very simple integrations to illustrate what we can do inside of SmartConnect. If you're used to Integration Manager, you already see a vast difference in that Integration Manager lives inside of Dynamics GP. And this, as you can see, clearly does not. It is a separate application. It doesn't live inside your ERP system, meaning that IT can be happy because you can have different logins for people and different security roles and different things like that. Power users, casual users that maybe just need to integrate things every so often, or even for automated users where we have routines that you don't log into SmartConnect to integrate data. Somebody, a consultant, developer such as myself, help to set it up and it just works in the background. So that's one of the big reasons that we've been using SmartConnect for a number of years for our clients, is that we have the ability to do automated integrations, and it does it very well. So this is the main menu of SmartConnect. There's a lot going on here. I'm not going to dive into everything because that could take an hour, 2 hours, 4, depending on what the need is and what kind of integration that you're looking to do here. I've set up 2 very simple integrations, like I mentioned before. One, in fact, going to Dynamics GP, which I'll show for those that are already on GP. We'll show you something familiar. And one going to Dynamics BC. So these 2 integrations, they're pulling from a source file. And let me show that to you quickly. Happens to be an XML file. This could be a flat file, could be a text file, could be an Excel file, could be a more technical file that someone in IT might have created for you. It could be a SQL database. It could be an Access database. There is a wide variety of sources that this can connect to. So this was a XML file that we had used for another client that I changed some of the data for, and it's basically just order information, some header information, who's it going to bill to, some contact information, and then 2 order lines down here. So very, very simple. We're just going to do it with one so we can kind of illustrate this. So that's our data source. And I'll briefly open each one of these to kind of get a look of what's kind of under the hood. Because if you've been using Integration Manager, a lot of the concepts are the same as far as you have a source, you have fields in the source, you want to map those fields to somewhere else and maybe apply some logic to the fields. Maybe you do lookups, maybe you do some manipulation. That's all still here. That's all still part of what we call the ETL realm, where you extract, transform, and load your data from your source to your target systems. SmartConnect does that, plus a lot more. So when I open this up, we can see there's a lot of options here. I don't want to go into every one of them and overwhelm us today, but we have selected our order XML file, and I can preview the data here. And from what it was before in a horizontal or a vertical format, you can see that SmartConnect has parsed this file apart and put it into more of a record or a record by record format, much as you would see in like an Excel file. So it's gone through and figured out what the source fields are and what the data is. So you can preview that to see, did you get the right file, or you hooked up to the right source. Destination for this one is GP. I happen to be using GP 2016, although this SmartConnect will support multiple flavors going back many, many years, and of course the current as well. We're going to be sending this order into sales order processing. And I only have one company, so just the Fabricam, just the TWO setup. And down here below is, what am I going to send to, what parts of this am I going to send to the sales order processing sections in GP? And there's a lot of different options on here that you can do with your data. And this is, of course, a GP perspective, but just to give you a feel for how you would interact this in a mapping exercise. So I happen to have what we're calling nodes. That's the terminology here. I happen to have a header node mapped and a line node mapped. I'm not worrying about much of the accounting right now, the distribution, the accounts and things like that. We're just trying to do a simple setup here. If I dive into one of these, what we have here is a screen that allows me to see the source data on the left side and all of my different target field options on the right side. Now, not all of these are necessary, but the ones that SmartConnect thinks are necessary to successfully integrate this order are all highlighted in red. It's not a hard rule, because sometimes when you map one field, suddenly you might need another. Scenarios change. It's a little bit of feeling your way through if you've never done this for the first time. And that's, of course, something we can help you out with. But if I were going to try to map a field, maybe I wanted to, oh, I don't know, we have, maybe I'd had a tax amount that I wanted to map over. One of the things I could do is I could try to locate my field in my source. Maybe it's, I don't have tax for this example, but I'll just choose one of these. Maybe it's this one. Or we'll pretend order currency is my tax. So I'm going to take this, and what I can do is I can click it and just drag it over to the tax amount, and it's going to fill it in over here. That's the most simplistic way. And if you have your data all set up, you could choose other options too. I could come up here to this destination options and say, try to quickly map this based on a technical or display name over here on the right side. And then SmartConnect's going to whip through all your source columns and try to just auto map them. And then you can review that and accept it or not. Well, I know this is not a real tax amount, so I'm just going to click into here and then just hit delete. We're going to unmap that. But to get this to work for GP, there are some lookups I needed to do. I'm doing some calculations on a date, some formatting. So there's lots of different things I can do here with translating data. Contact person is one. I'll open this up. And for anybody that's ever done or wants to do any programming in your life, SmartConnect is pretty powerful for that. If there's power users or people in your IT department, SmartConnect will use .NET scripting. So Visual Basic .NET or C#. So you can take your source and put it through .NET code translations to achieve your results. In this case, I'm taking my first name field and then basically concatenating it with my last name and putting a space in between. Now, if you don't know .NET, and I'm lucky because I do, I've been doing this for close to 15 years now, SmartConnect does have helper functions. So you can try to find a helper function down here to try to fit your need. So there's lots of different options here for transforming your data. And we're not going to cover all of them here today, but suffice to say, we have integrations that are pretty complicated that we've managed to get working with SmartConnect using a combination of the different types of either calculated fields or lookups to achieve. So I'm going to hit OK out of here, exit the mapping screen, and we're going to run this in. I could highlight the integration and I could say run the integration. This is, of course, if you're logged in and you're interacting with this. I mentioned automation in the beginning of this. There's ways to automate running a SmartConnect. There is a SmartConnect scheduler service that you can set this up and then go find your scheduled integrations in here, and the scheduled service will run it for you, and a variety of other technical IT ways to achieve that. So for here, I'm just going to highlight this and hit run. So this was one single order, and it succeeded. And if it did not succeed, you'd get all this information in this big white space here with error information, if necessary. And if we have time, I may demonstrate that too. So that was our order. And I'm in GP right now in Fabricam. in my sales. And I want to make sure that I look at the right one. Web order, yep. Sales batches. And it was the XML. I'm going to open up my batch. Go and find it. And then let's go take a look at our source data. Oh, it's not, it moved. I have a copy, but it moved. What moved, that's because part of that integration, when it succeeded, I told it to take it out of the folder it was sitting in and go put it into a new folder. In this case, an archived folder. So I'll go here. And in fact, you can see that my order, I was playing with it earlier today, but the order has moved now, and it has this timestamp, which is actually 12/12/20. We moved the order and we gave it a new file name that had the timestamp of it. Maybe I can open these up side by side. Went to Aaron Fitz. Yep, that's correct. I think this looks good. I had my customer PO number in GP. I set that as this field web user ID. Thought that might be useful for bringing in. $45 was the total cost. That looks to be correct. I scroll down here. Indeed, I have my 2 lines, $25, and then another one for quantity of 2 with $10 over here. I'm happy. That looks good. I will go ahead and close that. We can get out of GP at this point. And we can dive into our next integration. And the next integration, it uses the same file. So I'm just going to queue that up. Take my copy and rename it because my source is looking for specifically this name. Now you might be thinking, well, that's a shame because what if it wasn't named this exactly? Well, don't worry, because SmartConnect has an idea what's called a folder data source. So I could say, look in my sources folder for anything that's an XML file that has a specific format. So then I wouldn't have to worry about having my file have a specific name, especially if it's generated from like Bankside or maybe some other systems generating the file in the first place. You don't have control over that. Let's go ahead and get into our XML to BC integration. So it's very similar setup to what we had before. We're still looking at our same order. So if I preview it, it's the same 2 records, which is really 1 order, but 2 lines. So we see the line information. But instead of GP, we're going to Business Central. The Business Central, there's a couple different ways to connect to it. And I have chosen the OData connection, which is the technology connection that Microsoft is moving for the future. So that's what I've chosen here. We have an instance, and I'm actually going to a TM group BC instance. And in this case, we are going to be sending this as a sales order. I have chosen amongst the many different types of services, the endpoints that I could choose in BC that I have exposed for this purpose. I'm choosing the sales document endpoint. And just like with the GP mapping screen, if I go ahead and open up this sales document, which is like the header, I see my left side, which is my source information, and then my right side is my Dynamics BC specific field information. Now with BC, it's a little bit more nuanced about what I concretely need to integrate. SmartConnect decided not to highlight any of these fields in red because the scenarios are even more varied than what we could do for Dynamics GP. But you can see I have several fields mapped for whatever my setup is in BC. Some date calculations that I'm doing here. Not a lot, very simple. We're just going to try to get this order in with its 2 lines. Before I click run on that, we can hop through a couple of these other screens because we want to show off kind of what kind of options you have, capabilities in SmartConnect. SmartConnect, there's a lot of logging it can do, which is very helpful for IT resources. So, and these are centralized to a SmartConnect database. Multiple users are running SmartConnect integrations, or you have them being run in an automated fashion. A system administrator or a power user can look at the logs to figure out were there any problems or errors. Another interesting thing that SmartConnect can do, that Integration Manager could do, but SmartConnect, it's a lot more intuitive, is this idea of tasks. And I'm on this task tab. What this is you can do tasks that occur before the integration even runs. You can do tasks while it's processing the record or the document, tasks that happen before it processes it or after it, whether it fails or succeeds. And then after the integration as a whole processes, whether it fails or succeeds. So I happen to have some tasks set here. I can double click and go into this. I have a task called set globals. I'm doing some kind of calculation here for line number configuration as I'm sending to Dynamics BC. So that's the purpose of this. I also have some tasks here as well. I've disabled them for BC because I didn't want them to interfere with my GP integration. But this one is moving the file. So like I mentioned before, after it succeeded or failed, I might want to move it. So I'm going to enable this. And this was just as easy as just navigating to where my file was, selecting it, and then navigating to where my folder wants to be and selecting it. So I will just go ahead and into these and turn these on. Now, what I will try to do is simulate an error, because what SmartConnect can do is, there's some setup required in this, but if there's errors, you might want to be notified that there were errors. You might want to be notified right away. Maybe a group wants to be notified. So you can set up error notification emails to send to group addresses if you have that, and include a lot of useful information. I have this set to go to myself and Roger, and that's enabled. Go ahead and enable this to move on success as well. So I want to mention I want to generate an error. Let's see. Line data is not there. Well, that was a good error. That's not the error I wanted. It was a different error. Let's go in and grab a file. I added a line field. My mapping was expecting the line field, and it was complaining, hey, you didn't have it. Let me open this up and make sure this is the file. Yep, so it's got this line. I'm going to rename it. So it is happy. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to maybe take out a field that I know it needs to integrate with. Document lines. I took out the line number. Okay. That should be good to generate a nice error. So let's give it a try. Because it's all well and good if I show you everything works great, but we know day to day, that's not always the case. All right. So I know the line field was not mapped, and we need that to be mapped. So what happened here was I got an error message. I can double click on this, and it said failed to create the record. And what it was doing in the background was the API for Dynamics BC was trying to send both lines that I had with a line number 0, and it was saying, hey, you already sent me a line number 0. So that's fine. If for some reason you were running this manually and you knew that it was a data problem and you were thinking, oh, well, I just need this in right now. How about I fix it? right now. You could come down to this Fix button, click it, and it's going to pop up and present you with the data that it was seeing from the source. And you could come into here and change it on the fly. And if that looked good to you, you could say, run them all again. We're not going to do that because that wasn't the case. So I'm going to exit out of there. And I'm going to bring up for my email. This is what SmartConnect just sent me after that failure. So some things to note. I did configure this a lot. You do start out with a blank template. So there's lots of things you can add in. But it does tell me what the integration name is, XML to BC, what the company I was processing in. So if you have multiple BC companies, this would show here. Who was running it? So I'm signed on as a SmartConnect user called TMG Development. You know, when the run happened, start time and end time. I have some activity here, how many records were processed, how many failed, how many succeeded. And then of course, what were the errors? This could go to yourself, could go to a group. You want good communication. It also has in this attached Excel file, what was the data that caused the error to? So on a quick glance, you could look at this and maybe you've got some familiarity with the data and you can go, wait a minute, that customer doesn't even exist. That's why we got an error that said customer doesn't exist. So I'm going to close that. We're going to bring our file back because it went in the failed folder this time. So I'm going to copy that, bring it back into sources, and we're going to rerun it. This time we're going to add in that line number field. I'm going to go back into my lines node. Look for my line field and map that to line number. Looks good. Going to BC. Not sure if I already had this document in from a testing session I was doing beforehand. I think that's it. So let's go ahead and delete that. Because if I bring it in again, it's gonna error out. In GP, we went to Aaron Fitz, but I don't have that customer here. So I'm using a Datum Corporation instead, which is mapped to customer number 10,000. So we're going to run this. And that went lovely. So if I go back into our BC instance, there's my new sales order. Open it up. A Datum Corporation, which is what I needed. And then we've got our 2 lines, 2 items. And they total to 45, which is what I was expecting from this this web order for my fictional processing system. So this was a very simple example. There's a lot more you can do, a lot more fields to integrate. I hope that this gave you a sense for what you can do in SmartConnect. There's a lot more than just simple files, like I mentioned before. You can connect to a slew of data sources, Excel files, text files. Of course, there's my XML. You can query back into Business Central if there's something you want to move from Business Central to somewhere else. You can connect to Dynamics 365 CE, otherwise known as CRM. Of course, there's a GP connector that you can connect to SQL connection types. ODBC, so maybe that's also a SQL-based or some other system that doesn't have a connector, but someone sets up for you. Connects with SmartConnect's other product, PopDoc, Salesforce, Smart Lists inside of GP, multi-data source, which literally lets you combine data sources and do some filtering between them. Maybe you want to write out a export to a file of customers that are the same between Dynamics GP and Dynamics CRM. So you would set up a multi-data source, linking into each one of those, and then combine them where they equal. And then you can use SmartConnect to do that and then export them to an Excel file. So it's not just for getting data into GP or in this case, BC. There's a lot more you can do with this. With that, that's all I have for today.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
could you show them and talk a little bit about just the run integrations part, so that in case they had 20 maps, but some user only needed to see 2 or 3 maps, how that might work?
Yeah. So I briefly mentioned security in like at the top. Depending on what security you have, you may see some maps versus others. In this instance of SmartConnect, I only have one user set up, and it happens to be an administrator. But if maybe it wasn't, there's different permissions that you can give the user, such as only letting them run integrations, or maybe you want to let them be able to get into the maintenance screens to maybe do some exports or imports. Maybe you don't want to give them abilities to edit or modify the data sources you might want to have control over. Make them back an admin because I only have the one user. Integration permissions. So if this wasn't a admin, because they get access to everything by default, you can pick and choose which integrations you see, so that you might have 20, 100 integrations. So every time you open up your own instance of SmartConnect, you don't want to be inundated with all of that. You just want to see what you need to work with. That's one way to maybe tailor a SmartConnect user to what integrations they need to work with daily. Connectors too, so you can have more fine-grained control over who can have access to what system, whether that's sourcing data or sending data to. A way to kind of collate your integrations, if you do have many, is what's called integration groups. So I've set up several integration groups here that, and of course I'm on the security screen, so this is which integration groups that my TMG development user has access to. Let me cancel it here. This is one that I use all the time. Integration groups. If I wanted to create one, I can go into this button here and just add more or delete as necessary. So I've got 4 set up: experimental, production, radioactive, testing. And the idea behind this is each of these integrations, if I go into one right now and go in the options tab, I can set it to an integration group. So I might want to take this one from testing to radioactive, and I'll hit save. And in this grid here of all the properties of the integration, one of these properties is group. What I can do is any of these fields really, but most useful I find for group is I can take this, drag it up here, and now each of the integrations is segmented into their category. Now, experimental radioactive may not be very useful. What is more useful usually is I might have a group that is Dynamics BC or BC sales orders. And that's a lot more meaningful. So I could change that and put a group there so that if I only care about my sales orders for a particular work session, I know they're already categorized. So I'm not getting lost in the weeds. Does that help, Roger?
Yes, it does, because that is an issue that many GP users of Integration Manager face, is they may have too many maps appearing and which one to use, or someone grabs the wrong map. And I was hoping that, you showed here, I hope everybody picked up on that you can limit what people see and therefore reduce the opportunity for errors.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Did Integration Manager have a way to copy a map? I can't remember if it did.
It has a way to copy them. Doesn't always work the best depending on what you've done. But that leads me to a question, Bill. Are you able to port those existing Integration Manager integrations over to SmartConnect?
No, they are based on entirely different technologies, data structures, et cetera, et cetera. There's no direct line from an Integration Manager mapping to SmartConnect. So what that would entail is getting under the hood of what that Integration Manager mapping was doing, mapping wise, logic wise, et cetera. What's the reasoning behind it? Pretty much the entire picture, and taking that information and creating it inside of SmartConnect.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the viewers?
We do not have any questions, but if you have any questions, you can type them out now. Is there anything else you guys want to go over while we wait to see if there are any questions?
Yeah, I could dive a little bit with my duplicate mapping I just created here. Dive a little bit into kind of what are some of the things that we can do with SmartConnect that Integration Manager may not have been able to do or do as easily, and that's a lot of the tasks. And this is where power users, very technical people, can do a lot of powerful things with SmartConnect. So I'll just choose one section here. I'll do a if the integration succeeds. Some of the tasks we can do are, some of them are ready to go for you. Copy file, delete file, move file, so file maintenance. So I showed that with the move file task, where it's basically get some options on what do you want to do with your source file after it's done. So those are pretty fast and easy to get up. You can run a file. Maybe there's a separate application that needs to run, or an IT process that needs to run. So the run file task, you can point to whatever that executable file is, or a BAT file or something to that extent, and SmartConnect will run that. You can have it run before the map runs. So maybe the source isn't fully generated. Maybe you have SmartConnect that is sourced to a SQL table, to a database, and that there's a query, and maybe the query, there's no data right away. What you could do in SmartConnect is a before integration run task and have it basically generate the data for you, almost on demand. And so that the query that is the source suddenly sees the data, because the before integration run literally happens before it's even seen or examines the source data. So that's kind of an interesting trick that you can do with SmartConnect. You can run other integrations. If I go into this screen, what it's looking for is which other SmartConnect maps do you want to run? So you can do what's called chaining. You can have one integration run, and if it's successful, run another one, and so forth. Or if it failed, maybe you have some integration that's made specifically if another map fails. Maybe it reprocesses or something to that extent. So you can set up integrations in an individual manner, but if you chain them together, you might have kind of a workflow type of concept. Maybe your workflow is you have multiple data points from a system you need to get in. Maybe you're processing a slew of invoices, credit memos, service orders, project jobs, etc., customer updates, you name it. Well, you can set up a SmartConnect map individually for each one of those and then chain them together so that they all process, in a sense, in a row. So that's one interesting thing you can do here as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Roger and Bill, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.